Ever wondered about the job hazards of being a suspected witch? Spoiler, it usually ended in death by torture. Let's start with the merely harsh torture methods and end with the downright diabolical witch punishments throughout history. Buckle up, it's a bumpy broom ride. 1. The swimming test, aka the dunking stool. This torture was as straightforward as it was soggy. If you float, you're a witch, because clearly evil comes with built-in water wings. If you sink, you potentially drown. Well, congratulations on proving you're innocent, but now you're unalive. How it worked? Suspected witches would have their thumbs tied to their opposite toes and were thrown into the water to see if they would float. If they did, they were considered witches because it was believed that the water, being pure, rejected them. If they sank, oops, they weren't a witch, but now they're at the bottom of the pond and no one is going in after them. The dunking stool torture method variant involved a chair to which the accused was tied before being repeatedly plunged into the water. This has not only served as a test for witchcraft, but also as a brutal form of public humiliation and punishment. Crowds would gather to watch these ordeals, cheering on this swimming lesson from hell. Savage. 2. Pricking and scratching. In this acupuncture session gone wrong, professional witch pickers, yes, that was a job, would use needles to stab various parts of the accused body to find the place believed to be the witch's mark or devil's mark. This mark was thought to be an area that was insensitive to pain and did not bleed, supposedly given to them by the devil as a token of their pact. If a spot was found where the needle entered without causing pain or bleeding, it was taken as evidence of witchcraft. Unfortunately, the pricking tool often had a retractable blade, allowing unscrupulous prickers to fake the absence of bleeding. Yeah, these guys were major pricks. Scratching, predominantly used in Scotland and parts of England, involved the alleged victims of the witch. They would scratch the face of the accused witch with their nails. It was believed that drawing blood from the witch would not only break the witch's spell, but also reduce her power to harm others. If the victim's condition, whatever it was, improved after scratching the suspected witch, it was seen as proof that the accused was indeed a witch. Sounds like an unfair catfight to me. 3. Witches' cakes. This is definitely not as tasty as it sounds, and it's less torture and more just superstitious stupidity. If someone came down with an unusual illness, it was of course blamed on who they thought the town witch was. All they had to do was bake a special cake to prove it. The key ingredient? The urine of the person bewitched. That's right, forget vanilla extract or chocolate chips. The witch's cake called for something a little more personal. This concoction was then mixed with rye meal and baked into a cake, not to be served at parties, but to be fed to a dog because dogs, of course, were the animal helpers of witches. The theory was that the dog, by eating the cake, would somehow suffer the effects of any witchcraft aimed at the person who provided the urine. If the dog exhibited any distress or odd behavior, it was taken as proof that witchcraft was afoot. I know dogs can eat some disgusting stuff, but I think anyone would feel bad after eating a pee-pee cake. Poor Fido. 4. The Witch's Bridle or Scold's Bridle. The Witch's Bridle, aka Scold's Bridle, was a charming little accessory from Ye Olde Torture Decor collection. This device wasn't just a fashion statement. It was a literal muzzle designed for those deemed too chatty or unruly, particularly targeting women accused of witchcraft. Imagine the Witch's Bridle as the medieval version of putting someone on mute. It consisted of an iron framework that encased the head, while a bit or gag was inserted into the mouth to prevent any incantations, nagging, or frankly, any form of verbal expression. In some models, this delightful piece of metal craftsmanship included a spiked plate that rested on the tongue. This feature ensured that any attempt at speech would be as pleasant as licking a cactus. To add to the communal spirit, the bridle was sometimes equipped with an external lock. After the local blacksmith clamped this contraption on the accused's head, they were often paraded around town, creating a walking advertisement for what happens when you decide to overshare your opinions. The idea was not only to torture the wearer, but to also provide a stark warning to other would-be gossipers, nags, or witches about the dangers of too much tongue wagging. 5. Pressing. The pressing torture method, or peine forte deux, if you want to be fancy, was the ultimate gym strength training program for witches. This method didn't involve any trendy diets or intense workouts. No, it was more of a literal pressure to weigh in on whether you were a witch or not. The setup for pressing was straightforward. The accused was laid flat on a hard surface, a wooden board was placed on top, and then weights, usually heavy stones, were gradually added until the person either confessed or, well, couldn't confess anymore. It was like the worst game of Would You Rather imaginable. Would you rather admit to witchcraft or have another boulder as a blanket? The idea was that if you were indeed a witch, you'd eventually call on your supernatural buddies to lift the weights, making a grand escape and proving everyone right. If no mystical weightlifter showed up and you were crushed, then oops, maybe you weren't a witch after all, but you were now a pancake. 6. Strappado. Also known as the hoist or reverse bungee jumping without the bungee, was a torture hit during the witch trials, mostly because it combined the fun of a carnival ride with absolutely none of the safety features. This method was all about lifting the accused into the air by their arms, which were bound behind their backs. The idea was to literally shake the confessions out of them, assuming, of course, that any confession obtained while being dangled like a marionette was bound to be reliable. The mechanics of Strappado were simple. Tie the accused's wrists together behind their back, attach the rope to a pulley system, and then hoist them up. Occasionally, weights were added to the prisoner's feet for that extra oomph in the interrogation process. Interrogators believed this method would help witches fall into confession. 7. The Judas Cradle. The Judas Cradle, also known as the least comfortable seat in history, makes even the worst economy class flight seem like a luxury. This notorious torture device was designed not so much for sitting as for suffering. Imagine a wooden stool with aspirations of becoming a spike. Yes, that's the Judas Cradle. Here's how it worked. The accused was hoisted up and then slowly lowered onto the pointy summit of the pyramid-shaped chair by their most delicate parts. The Judas Cradle was all about endurance. How long could you sit on this diabolical spike before confessing to just about anything to get off? It combined the suspense of a horror movie with the discomfort of a bad day at the office cubicle, multiplied by 1,000,000. The Judas Cradle is the medieval equivalent of a bad Tinder date. You come looking for a connection and leave hoping you never have to go through that again. The cradle wasn't just a seat, it was an experience, a very pointy, very personal one. 9. Thumbscrews. Thumbscrews were the go-to torture gadget for getting suspected witches to open up, literally one thumb at a time. These devices were simplicity at its cruelest, metal vices that clamped down on your thumbs. The idea was that a little pressure could go a long way in persuading someone to reconsider their reluctance to confess. The screws were turned gradually, tightening the grip and increasing the pain, which was supposedly just the thing to jog a woman's memory about her witchy activities. This little device offered a big punch and got lots of false confessions. It literally turned the screws on its victims. 10. The boot. The boot, affectionately known in witch circles as the medieval footwear from hell, was no ordinary footwear. It was more like the worst possible spa treatment for your legs, designed to squeeze confessions out of suspected witches like it was trying to juice a dry orange. This gruesome device consisted of wooden or metal panels that encased the leg from the knee down to the ankle. But the real horror lay in the extra features. Wedges hammered mercilessly between the panels and the leg. Each strike of the hammer was like tightening the laces on a pair of shoes that were several sizes too small, except the shoes could literally break bones. The fashion statement made by the boot was clear. Pain is in. As the wedges were driven deeper, they created a crushing pressure that could make even the hardiest suspected witch reconsider their silence. We all know the kind of torture it is trying to walk home after a long night in new heels or tight sneakers. At least today, if our shoes are torturous, we can simply take them off. No confession necessary. 11. Ordeal by fire. And lastly, it wouldn't be a list about torturing witches if we didn't talk about burning them. Because nothing says, I'm innocent until proven crispy, quite like being asked to handle red-hot objects or walk through flames. Back in the day, if you were suspected of witchcraft, this test was the ultimate way to grill you, literally. The logic was brilliantly straightforward. If you could pass through the fire without turning into barbecue, or if your burns healed unusually quickly, you were obviously in cahoots with supernatural forces. On the other hand, if you got burned just like any ordinary human, well, congratulations on proving your innocence, though you might want to keep aloe vera handy. As we wrap up our macabre tour through the history of torture methods for witches, it's clear that back in the day, people took the phrase trial by fire way too literally and had a very twisted definition of baking a cake. We've gone from pressing to pricking, proving that the human imagination can be incredibly inventive when it comes to the wrong things. And here's to the progress we've made. From fearing witches to following them on Instagram, and from baking questionable cakes to just ordering dessert from Uber Eats. Did I miss the best torture method for witches? Let me know in the comments, like and subscribe, or else I'll have to get witchy on you.